you. So thank you for bearing with us. Now is the last interview. Well, no, it has been fantastic so far. And the last artist is Jordan Holmes. Jordan is an artist and scholar who works primarily in painting and sculpture. Her work has been shown internationally in the US, UK, Canada, and it's seen in a lot of private collections. She is the recipient of San Francisco Art Institute 2016 to 19 Grand Fellowship Award, as well as the 2020 Artist Grant at the Vermont Studio Center. So welcome, Jordan, and thank you so much for being here with us today. We're grateful to be sharing a bit of your story as well.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So Jordan, can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing during the pandemic, like when were you spending your quarantine?
Yeah, I think like similar to the other artists, it's kind of, been a bit of an emotional pendulum. I swing from feeling very, excited and positive some days about the possibilities, and then other days I feel kind of incredibly tired and unmotivated, but I'm grateful to still be working from home for both my day jobs and also working out of a home studio at the same time. So the boundaries between my day jobs and studio and relaxation and personal time have kind of become very blurry. But I'm starting to, figure out a new routine, a new normal. And I'm really just trying to, enjoy the extra studio time. I'm not really making more work than I usually would. My friend, Kathy Sirico, who's an amazing artist based out of Brooklyn. I was speaking to her the other day, and she kind of put it perfectly when she said she's just trying to enjoy making more rather than putting more pressure on herself to like create the next great work of art under quarantine. So I'm just trying to keep that in mind, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of new information. So I think time is the only way to really digest what is going on. And so can you share with us, for those who don't know your work, a little bit about who you are as an artist and like your practice?
Yeah, sure. So I work in between painting. I'm formally trained as a painter, but I work in between painting and sculpture, and I also do some textile work. My work typically tends to grapple with our kind of fraught relationship to the built environment. So I'm really interested in how space is materialized, how it's organized, how it's made to mean, how space produces meaning. I think a lot about the like coded distinctions between space and place, and like how to unsettle the presumed divisions between public and private space. So yeah, I really think about my work as like a way to arrive at a more nuanced definition of space. I've long been collecting imagery relating to domestic spaces and urban architecture and the built environment, and I pull these off of the internet, but also document things that I encounter in my day-to-day movements. And fluorescent colors are pretty prominent in a lot of my work. And I'm interested in them because they're like these highly instructional colors, right? When we encounter neon or fluorescence in the built environment, they're typically dictating how bodies have to navigate through a certain space. They prohibit and beckon us into certain spaces. They keep us in our lane. They tell us where to enter and where to exit. So they're these incredibly authoritative colors, both formally and politically, I think. And so there's a lot of visual and aesthetic and even political richness there for me.
Fantastic. You mentioned briefly that you also have a day job. So can you tell us like a bit of your background and with your artist practice as an artist and the other?
Sorry, do you mind just
you froze up? Yeah,
you just cut out a little bit there for a second.
I'm so sorry, it's Brazilian internet.
That's okay.
I said that you mentioned briefly that you also have a day job. So I would like to learn a little bit more about your background and what led you into becoming an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So I was born and raised in Vancouver, Canada. I did my BFA in critical and cultural practices at Emily Carr University, which is one of the larger art schools on the West Coast in Canada. And then after that, I kind of immediately jumped into applying for grad school. So I didn't take too much time in between. And I got offered a spot at the San Francisco Art Institute where I did both MFA and an MA at the same time. So it was a 3-year program. And I just finished that in the spring. So I've been in San Francisco now for a little over 3 years. And I'm currently working at a museum in Napa called DeRosa, as well as a gallery in San Francisco called Artiste. So I work 6 days a week, or was up until recently working 6 days a week, and then kind of trying to puzzle piece my studio time in between all that work. You know, a lot of the studio time was occurring on the weekends and kind of, you know, when I would get home from work. I also recently spent a month in residency at the Vermont Studio Center, and I would like to say that that's kind of like ideally my studio schedule. Ideally, I would love to kind of transition into working full time as an artist and treat it like a 9-to-5 day job, because I'm kind of actually a better middle of the day painter. I'm not very productive in the early morning or late at night. So I've always kind of said, like, when it comes to painting, I'm a sprinter more than a marathoner. So I like to kind of work in short bursts throughout the day or across multiple days or weeks, which isn't really conducive to having 2 day jobs. So I've kind of been trying to embrace this time, being able to work at home for my day jobs, to also do studio all in between. So it's kind of all just sort of happening all at once, which has been an interesting sort of experiment, I guess.
Yeah. So in a way, this pandemic has helped, I would say,
I guess,
or like how did it transform your?
Yeah, it's kind of weirdly conducive to my process, I guess, just being that, like, a kind of more of a sprint worker. And it's also, I think, too, like, helped me to learn that like, to consider things outside of actual production as a part of my process. I think, like, in the past, and I think a lot of artists can relate to this, I've been really tough on myself, especially when I was in grad school, when the competition is so heavy, for not working these, like, extreme long hours or as frequently in the studio as my colleagues. And I've come to realize that, like, a part of what I do requires me to just stew on images and forms and textures and colors for a while I can kind of compose them into something that I want to make. And sometimes that actually takes, you know, months, whether I realize it or not. That's also, like, a really productive and really crucial part of my studio practice.
Got it. So can you talk a little bit about a standout piece or a series of pieces that you have created or that are still planning to create, which would be meaningful for your work as an artist?
Yeah, definitely. Well, one standout piece that comes to mind, and it's quite an old piece from 2017, and it's not a particularly good painting either, and it doesn't look much like what I do now, but when you brought up that question, it's the first thing that comes to my mind, so I'm just going to go with that. It's important to me because everything I've made sense has built on or been compounded upon this piece, and I've actually, especially some of the pieces that we're doing prints of for this COVID-19 relief initiative are all kind of based off of this other work that I'm going to talk about, and I wouldn't have been able to make those if I hadn't first made this much earlier work. So.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it on your site? If we had a visual of it, it would be nice. But otherwise, we can
on my
share
website.
It after.
Yeah, it's not on Alpha's site, unfortunately, but it's on my personal website. It's, let's see, keep going down. It's this gray one right above the yellow one. The one right above it. Yeah, that one.
This one?
Oh, no, the one below it. Yeah, that one. Yeah, so this piece I made, and I've just been thinking about it a lot because transition, like the ideas of transition and relocation kind of seem really relevant right now in our current situation, and they've also been often occurring themes in my own work, especially when I was in grad school. I had to move houses a few times in a really short period of time, and actually during the summer of 2017, our entire graduate cohort had to relocate to a new campus right in the middle of the program. So it was kind of a turbulent time and really stressful situation. Moving your studio can be a very kind of anxiety-inducing sort of situation, as well as moving to a new home. So moving house and studio all at the same time, kind of it all was sort of collapsing in on one another. And because of that, I was thinking a lot about how spaces become occupied and vacated. So I started taking a lot of photos of like discarded piles of objects people had left on the streets in San Francisco, and made paintings based off of those. And this work is actually based off a photo of all the stuff that was in my studio in the dog patch in San Francisco, sitting out on the sidewalk when we had to relocate to the new campus. So I just kind of snapped like a quick photo of all the things from my studio piled on top of one another on the street while I was waiting for my partner to pull the moving van around. And I was just kind of very in awe of this like material index of everything I'd been working on up until that point, all kind of accumulated in one site. And yeah, like I said, it was like a very spatially disorienting time for me, which got me thinking a lot about, I was really starting to able to crystallize ideas about how objects produce spatial relations. So like I said, this isn't really how I paint anymore. It's not a particularly good painting, but it's a really important one for me. And it really helped me to start learning how to emphasize the formal properties of space and then translate those properties into compositional elements for a painting. And in that, I kind of learned that I'm more interested or concerned with intimating or suggesting space rather than directly quoting space. So, at that point, I think it was translation as a formal strategy became really key for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
very interesting. And what about looking forward? How do you see your work developing? And if you could also add a little bit, how would you imagine like a potential collaboration with us as well? Yeah, it's just the beginning, but
yeah.
I think we can do a lot together. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And like I mentioned, I would ultimately like to transition into working as a full-time artist. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working towards it. And I think I mentioned that I recently got back from a month-long residency at the Vermont Studio Center, which was so transformative. And I'm already looking forward to doing more residencies. I think I work really well with a deadline just because I have been in school for so long. I did art school for like 7 years in a row. So I think that kind of like highly rigorous environment where you're essentially being hothoused, and you only have access to the space and the resources for a limited amount of time is like weirdly productive for me. So I hope to be able to do more residencies in the future, perhaps on other continents once hopefully the borders reopen. I'd also like to continue exhibiting regularly with my gallery in San Francisco. They're called Marrow Gallery. And I do have an upcoming solo exhibition with them. Unfortunately, it was postponed. It was supposed to be in early May, but due to the pandemic, it's been postponed. So we're hoping, fingers crossed, for late summer or maybe in the fall. And aside from that, I'd also like to have a museum exhibition within the next 3 years, but it's a little difficult actually to envision like a
Jordan, I think we lost her.
No, I
think we lost you for a minute. I think we lost you for a minute.
Oh no. Yeah. I'm back? Where did you cut out at?
I heard everything, but like maybe go back to you would like to have a museum exhibition.
Yeah, I would like to, that was kind of one of my rough goals, but I'm just recently thinking that it is a little difficult to envision a future for, I think, for a lot of artists for their practice right now, not only because, things are so uncertain, but just I think it's also really going to shift kind of the landscape of how artists work because of the pandemic. So, and we're already seeing that happening, and a lot of things like this, case in point, moving online more and more. So, but that said, I think that working with Alpha I hope will allow me to ultimately be kind of less precious about my work and take more risks and become more experimental, and it also maybe be more hopeful that even if I produce something that, I work large scale a lot, so knowing that even if I produce something that might not see the light of day in its original form, I still have the opportunity to circulate it online through Alpha's platform. So that's really exciting.
And as a print. And I think for those who don't know our work too well, one of the main objectives is really helping artists to bridge that stage on their careers when they're having to have a side job and work on their creative practice on their spare time to become a full-time artist and connections with the different audiences around the world. We're currently operational in South America, North America, Europe, and soon South Africa. So hopefully you're gonna get to enchant a lot of other people in those continents too. And we are hoping that we can facilitate that happening as soon as possible, even with the borders closed. So we're getting close to the end of our time here, and I would love to know now the quick answer questions. What is a book that you've read recently which inspired you?
Well, I'm doing a lot of rereading of things that are already on my shelf. So one book would be How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell is one of my favorites, and it's kind of like an argument against productivity culture, which I think is very kind of relevant for this time, because I've had like a lot of difficulty with this surge in like productivity culture rhetoric since the pandemic, and I think we've all kind of seen these posts on Instagram telling us like this is the perfect time to like write a book or start a business or get super in shape, or like I've seen other posts being like, well, Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was under quarantine, and that may be true, and I think it's great in theory to like aspire to that level of achievement, but I also think that productivity culture can be harmful because it makes me sometimes feel like my body and my time are not my own. So this book is really kind of an argument against productivity culture, and it's super interesting. But I also read a lot of fiction, and a good friend of mine recently published a book called The Last True Poets of the Sea. Her name's Julia Drake, and it's an incredible, incredible book. So I've been kind of taking a look back at that as well since the first time I read it. So yeah.
Amazing. We're gonna check those out.
Yeah.
Now a movie or a series?
I'm kind of obsessed with reality TV, always have been. So if you haven't tried it, I would highly recommend Vanderpump Rules. It's my favorite show.
Okay.
The show for geniuses. It's amazing. It's just reality TV is great because it's like, it's just a way for me to decompress at the end of the day. So check it out.
Amazing. A comfort food, which has been very comforting lately.
Oh, there's so many. Well, there's this little ramen shop a few blocks away from where I live in San Francisco, and it's still open and doing delivery and takeout service. So my partner and I, we try to order from there at least once a week because their ramen is incredible. So that's where I like to get takeout from a lot. But other than that, we've been doing like a lot of large batch dishes, like making large batches of chili and yellow curry. So that's kind of always very comforting.
Yeah. No, perfect. And lastly, what is something or someone who inspires you?
Well, I think because all of our physical worlds have gotten really small lately, and we're all kind of now just sort of having to keep to our neighborhoods. I'm trying to really appreciate my neighborhood a bit more, especially when I go for walks. I live in the Sunset District in San Francisco, and there's like a lot of great colors and textures, and the houses are all the row houses are like painted in these garish sort of like Pepto-Bismol pink and like canary yellow sort of colors, which is really, informs a lot of the work I do. So I'm trying to be, I think, hyper observant of those things. But aside from that, I think also just seeing how like studious and ambitious my colleagues and contemporaries have been online. I know a lot of artists who've lost shows or work or other opportunities due to the pandemic, including myself, but in spite of it all, everyone is still working and hustling, and that's really the most encouraging thing to see my network kind of still striving for the best. So yeah.
Absolutely. Art is gonna save us all.
Hoping, right?
It's what is gonna keep our spirits high. Yeah. Well, Jordan, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking with you. For those who want to check a little bit more about her work, her profile is also on the Alphas platform, and you can find a link to her own website. And if you have any questions, we can always put you in touch with all of those amazing artists. And I think that's the end for today's interview series. Manu, would you like to say anything?
No, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you all soon. There's a comment here from Craig. Hey, Craig, how are you doing? All three artists have been very generous in sharing their stories behind their works. Please share with us the preferred way to follow their works and show us going forward in an email to all of us. Thank you. Yeah, we'll share the recording. We'll trim it down into individual recordings as well, so that you can use this as a tool as well to get your work out there. And they're all on Alpha, so you can follow them on Alpha. Check out their works. All of the works are benefiting a COVID-19 relief campaign. So thank you, and we'll see you all next week.
Just one more thing. Yes, we're going to be running those lunch interview series and different webinars now every Friday. We're going to be releasing a longer schedule, like for the coming interviews and webinars soon. But thank you so much. It has been a pleasure being with you all. Like, it's very meaningful for us to be able to share all of those stories. Like, we feel that we can contribute a little bit to what is going on, like, and hopefully inspire the audiences. And yeah, and so thank you. If you have any comments, please email us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.